You're in the water loop. Waterloop.
Hey, this is Travis with Waterloop. I want to tell you a story about High Sierra Showerheads, who I'm proud to have as a sponsor of this podcast, particularly because they make incredibly water-efficient showerheads. I've talked with owner David Malcolm about growing up in California, learning about the importance of water and energy efficiency from his father. David has been designing high-efficiency nozzles for agriculture and golf courses for the past 30 years. The golf course people actually came to him wanting a nozzle that produced a uniform spray but was water efficient. So David went in and designed a nozzle that explodes a low pressure stream of water into a shower of large, powerful droplets. David actually thought this would make a great showerhead, and that's how High Sierra Showerheads was born. And nobody has their nozzle technology. It's patented, and you get a great shower while saving water. Use promo code WATERLOOP for 20% off at highsierrashowerheads.com.
Waterloop.
Welcome to Waterloop. This is Travis. Probably the most looked forward podcast episode I've ever had personally here. I am joined by Jaimal Yogis. He is author of a number of incredible books that I've read a while ago. I have Saltwater Buddha here. He wrote The Fear Project, All Our Waves Are Water, and recently a children's book here, Mop Rides the Waves of Life. So Jaimal, I'm so glad to get to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, it's great to finally meet. We've been crossing paths on the interwaves, interweb waves. So this is really exciting. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and like I was just saying, this is a water podcast, but I like to talk about the ocean and talk about surfing, and I majored in college in philosophy and religion, so I certainly have a great affinity for your work and how you've explored all of these things through your books. So I guess where should we start here? The ocean. There's so many issues with the ocean, but I've always had an incredible spiritual relationship with the ocean. It feels like it really balances you out in life. It grounds you. It opens you up. It teaches you so many lessons, and I think you've certainly hit on those things in a lot of your writing. What are your feelings toward the ocean along those same lines?
I mean, I could go for ages about this.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can too, Travis. But what's hitting me right now is that quote by Rumi, best-selling poet of all time. We're not a drop in the ocean, or you are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a single drop. That is like a koan. It's a mystical line. It's a line of poetry. You don't really have to understand it to somehow feel it when you're standing on the coast or up on a bluff, or you're in the water surfing. There's something about me that is infinitesimally small that I feel right now, and yet at the same time infinite. And you can get at that on a quantum physics level.
Yeah,
like, wow,
yeah.
Within every atom, there's sort of the same juju as the rest of the universe. And you can also come at it from just a sense of mental spaciousness, of interconnectivity. But there's something that Rumi was getting at in that quote that I think explains so much about our experience in the ocean. That experience could be one of feeling in the flow, like kind of just like life's cruising along and I'm in my element, I'm in the zone. It can be one of like relaxation and rejuvenation, like the ocean gets us into like a parasympathetic state where we can, like, our bodies naturally heal. So it's medicine. Or it can be like a feeling of awe, just like the ocean gets me into that place of wonder, where I'm just like, kind of that little kid space where you're like looking at the sky and being like, why am I here? So all of those are the questions that both, the mystics have been getting at for millennia. And it's no wonder that, not only Rumi, but Buddhists and Christians and, shamans have used ocean metaphors through the ages. Like when you get into the old Buddhist texts, everything is an ocean of wisdom. There's an ocean of Buddhas. There's an ocean of virtue, an ocean of peace. So, we come from the sea. That's where life comes from. The blood in our veins is very close to the consistency of seawater. So even when you're out of the water, you're still kind of in the water. And for me personally, I'm kind of bouncing around to different ideas here, though it's always felt like a homecoming.
That's exactly one of the big things for me is like, and it gets back to your idea that we evolved from the sea at some point way, way back, right? I feel like it is a homecoming. It's like, this is where I am meant to be, even though I'm a land creature, right? It's very much that way. One of the things with the ocean and surfing and meditation is there's these experiences that are hard to verbalize, and it's hard to put into words and articulate. And it's one of the things I've always appreciated about your books is it's like, yes, those are thoughts or feelings, emotions, experiences I've had, but are so hard to articulate. And even if you articulate them, it's hard for people to fully grasp unless they've had that experience themselves, right? Like that stoke you get from surfing, that place you meld into when you're meditating. These are things that you can try to explain, but you have to have that experience almost to really understand.
Yeah, it's a good metaphor for or for spiritual practice, because you can talk about like what it feels like to meditate, just like you could talk about what an apple tastes like to someone who's never tasted an apple. They're never going to get from your explanation what the flavor of an apple is and what the experience is of that crunch and that crispness. You're never going to get the feeling of what it is to ride a wave through language. You have to ride a wave. And it's totally ineffable. It's something that is full body. You're completely present. It's spiraling molecules, domino affecting of, in numerous spirals that have crossed the whole ocean. They're tripping over each other to make this peeling, spiral effect that is at once looks solid, and yet it is actually just energy moving through this medium of ocean, and you're riding that energy, which is the memory of wind that was pushed into these molecules, and literally, because energy will stay in motion, just traveled for thousands of miles, and you're riding that peak. How can you explain that in words? I think it's been funny that I really landed in the place of trying to describe that, and I will always fall back on poets. My books, I'm always grabbing from poets, and because I think you need a kind of language that goes beyond the linear. I'm thinking of Philip Larkin when you were talking and said you're a philosophy and religion major, because he has one of my favorite quotes. If I were called in to construct a religion, I should make use of water.
Wow. I don't think I've heard that one, or I don't recall even getting that in your book. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it really gets at that point that like there's something, religions, we use ritual and symbolism to create this theater that allows you to get into that place of awe. The water does that automatically. And I think it's funny, surfers and kayakers, and it becomes a religious thing where you are basically a cult, and then you become a tribe, because you're like, these other people who do this with me, they understand something that I can't talk about to other people. They understand we share this experience that is bigger than language. And I think in a similar way to religion, it's like when you're singing together or whatever in a choir, and you're singing about God and creation and all these big ideas, you're like, we just had a moment together and now we're family. And I think that happens in the water tribes that exist out there too.
What about that idea that, you know, the feeling you get kind of when you're in the flow surfing, there's almost that transcendental state. You're transcending everything going on land and your daily life, and you're just kind of in this state, and kind of the parallels there with meditation, which, you know, you have a lot of time under your belt doing from having read your book. Yeah, how do you kind of view the overlap of those things?
Yeah, well, we know some cool stuff scientifically now, where it's like just the patterns on water are like feeding and stimulating parts of your brain that are not normally stimulated. So just looking at the water is like a massage for areas of your brain that you don't always access in the city, like very vertical kind of, you know, geometrical shapes that we enter into in the city. And then you get out on the water, and the way those ripples and waves cross over, it's stimulating and relaxing to our brains. It gets us out of planning mode, so we're more present. And similar to forests and stuff, those landscapes are so complex that it's funny, it feels like we're simplifying, but actually we're getting out of language mode, and all those neurons that are not usually stimulated in linear, you know, language name calling mode are waking up. So it's almost like you are going back to this kind of Eden state, where it's like before you know good and bad, before you ate of the fruit of knowledge, you were in this state of kind of presence, and the ocean allows for that. And that I think one of the reasons the water is so attractive is that to get into that state just from following your breath in meditation, it can take a little more work, because when you sit down to meditate, you may know this, Travis, it's like in the beginning, you're like, my mind's just churning out gibberish. I can't focus because you haven't trained it to. And so it takes a little more discipline to be like, I'm going to be still for 30 minutes or an hour or 10 days. And similar states will arrive as drifting in the water. They're different, but there's some similarities in the types of presence and getting out of the typical ways that we identify self and other through language, or we identify ourselves in time through like, I'm doing this now and I will be on a schedule the rest of the day. So, I mean, and those states are so valuable for our creativity, for just getting out of stress, for feeling joy, because, language is wonderful, and you need to know where you are on the map to drive around and have a schedule to be a being in the world. But it's not necessarily your true state. There's nothing true about, there's no reason that, you have to, you're not a good person just because you work 8 hours a day. That's a construct that we've created. Yeah. And so to really just like pop out of that, say, well, what does it really mean to be alive? Is something the water provides me. I can't tell you the number of times, I'm sure this is true for you, where I've just been in a state of like, my job's a wreck, whatever, my relationship's a wreck, I'm a bad dad. Get in the water, and all of a sudden I have that feeling of like, wait a minute, everything's right where it needs to be. I'm where I need to be. And
Yeah. I dr-
it's
I drag my family, sometimes if the family's having a rough day or somebody's grumpy or something, I'm like, if we can get to the beach, let's get to the beach, let's get in the water. Everybody's going to get smoothed out by that for sure. And,
yes.
and talking about the water and the forest and how that all feels, it's like, oh, wait a minute, we're meant to be in nature, right? We're not meant to be in these concrete jungles and this constructed world, and something about being in that natural environment just feels right and soothing. It's interesting. You mentioned other couple things you mentioned with water or with surfing and meditating. Yeah, definitely. Even if I'm doing just a 20 or 30-minute kind of sit, right? Like the first 10 minutes are kind of rough and choppy and struggling, and then you kind of find that place a little bit more. And sometimes it's like that surfing too, where I'm grumpy about something, I'm stressed about something. I feel like, oh, I've got this with me in the water. I'm gonna have I'm not gonna have a great time today. Why am I like this? And then it disappears in a similar kind of fashion, you know. Um, and then one other thing that I think I mentioned this maybe on Twitter and tagged you a couple years ago. I find myself out there in the ocean sometimes on a choppy day or a big day, scrambling around, trying to find the spot to sit, and I'm moving in and I'm moving out and I'm getting all agitated. And I'm like, this is the monkey mind right now, right? This is my mind. I have to, just like meditating, I have to just, let me just sit here and be calm and go with the flow. So some
Yeah.
good lessons there.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, no matter how long I've been doing this, I still get in the water sometimes. If it's good and it's crowded, I'm like, I gotta get my quota of waves. And you can find yourself on a gorgeous day doing the thing that you love, being like agitated or angry. And I think that's a good time to practice actual mindfulness in the water, where you can be like, hey, what if I actually just watch the light on the water while I sit here? What if I actually follow my breath? Or a practice in expectations. This goes back to the Buddha's idea of like, we suffer because of our incessant desires. So it's like our incessant desires for things to be another way than they are right now. So our failure to just accept feelings that we're having. And so surfing's a perfect metaphor for that, because it's like you get one wave, you're super stoked, and then you're like, oh, I got to get another one. And it's like, then if someone's in your way, they all of a sudden become an enemy or an obstacle. All those things are natural, and you as a human being, I think, have to say, well, this is fun. I can get into my competition mindset. That's okay. But as soon as it starts to turn on you and create suffering, you can catch yourself and be like, oh, what if I lower my expectations right now to just being in the water? Like, that's my goal of this session right now. Or one wave. Like, I'm going to get one wave. And so I play with that sometimes, those like expectation models. Because really what we're talking about, I think, with like water releasing us into freedom, is we're getting out of like our usual mental grooves. So like the groove of judgment of ourselves, or the groove of comparison. I need to meet a certain number of waves for this to be a quote unquote good session, or like all of those are fine goals to have for on a sort of linear plane. But if you want to be free, you kind of want to break out of that and experience life. And so, and you need, I think, a number of tools in your toolkit for breaking out of those grooves. Sometimes the water will do it. Other times it won't. If you go in the water every day, you can be a grumpy jerk every single time you get in the water. And we see that with people sometimes. So I think, mindfulness practice and a nature practice can really support each other, because sometimes you're like, I'm doing my 15 minutes a day of meditation, and that becomes like just another thing to check off the list in the day, and it becomes kind of dry. And then sometimes you surf every day, or maybe you mountain bike every day, and you're like, now this is becoming a chore, or it's becoming like a thing where I just am competing with other people and it's not freeing. And so you kind of use, but then you go out surfing, if your meditation practices become a little like stale, and you're like, oh, now I feel present and joyful. I'm like a little kid. I'm in beginner's mind. This is fun and playful. And you can take that experience and be like, oh, maybe I'll bring that into my sit of just like, I'm just going to sit here. And what is it like to breathe right now? Like, this is a curious experience. My body breathes on its own. My heart beats on its own. So you get back into like a beginner's mind place rather than this is a good sit. This is a bad sit. This is a good surf. This is a bad surf. So water's really powerful in breaking us out of those grooves, but sometimes you got to, shake it up.
Yeah, I appreciate a lot of what you said, but especially about that expectations piece. I think I struggle with that, with getting expectations too high for something, or taking things too hard when my expectations aren't met. When something goes a different way, I'm just like crushed by it. So I've just very recently been like, I need to try to keep it a little more balanced and level. Over this past summer, my 9-year-old really kind of took to surfing and enjoyed it and everything like that. And there's been times where we go and, you know this, the surf sinks. It's just not good. It's windy, it's mushy, whatever. And he starts to get agitated. He's like, why do we bring this stupid board? And I'm like, try to explain how the ocean works, right? Like, we get what the ocean gives us. A lot of times you're going to be frustrated as heck out there. But it's better to do the work of taking your board and not need it than to not bring your board and need having it. So trying to work on expectations with him as well, which is, you have 3 kids. Is that right? It's all part of it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, kudos for getting your 9-year-old in the water, because it's not. I mean, I have 3, and we live until recently. We're in San Francisco in the cold water, and I tried so hard to get them all into it, and we've had our moments, but where they're into it. But usually we have to get in the warm water, and it's challenging though. It's a challenging sport. You gotta get beat up a little bit. You gotta. It doesn't happen instantly where you're just like up and doing it. So I think as parents, we got to use those expectations on ourselves too, to be like, hey, I made it down here to the beach. I always try when I'm getting my 3 guys in their wetsuits. Like, if we all get in our wetsuits and we make it to the sand, I'm like, without a huge tantrum, I'm like, that right there is a success. If we then catch one wave, that's like really great. So I try to keep expectations low, but it's funny. We do that with our kids, like where we'll say like, oh, we'll help them manage their expectations, but then we don't always do it with ourselves, which I think is interesting, where it's like, if we don't meet certain goals at work, we're so hard on ourselves or whatever. And I don't know, I'd love to hear from you too, because I work on this constantly, is like you need to have high standards for yourself to do quality work. You can't just be like, oh, I don't care, I have low expectations and I'll just do this, because that'll be bad work. But you also can't get in this state of like self-judgment and criticism where you're just suffering through work, and also your creativity is limited because you're so judgmental. So I think for me, there is there's like that mantra I get to in the Fear Project. I don't know if you remember, but there's a prepare, flow, prepare, let go. And I think there's in worldly pursuits, whether you're learning surfing or learning writing, there is a grind element to it, and there's a letting go element to it. And I kind of go back to like, calligraphy or martial arts, where it's like, it's so disciplined. You have to really just repeat in order to find total relaxation and freedom. And so, but I think along the way, that hand opening and closing is sort of like power, like,
Right.
power, is constant. It's like the human condition.
You're totally right. That's very much how it is. You work hard, you prepare, you learn, you study, you practice, you put in all this work, and then at some point you have to realize, I've done all that. It is what it is now, and this is the product of it, and I have to let it be. I did all of that. I have to I have to accept I put in a tremendous effort. There is no perfection necessarily, right? And
Right.
you just kind of go with that. I mean, circling back to fatherhood and parenthood, it's definitely some of the same things. I think I probably beat myself up more about trying to be this great parent and father, and holding myself to these standards and being super critical of falling short.
Yeah.
And instead of being like, it's not always my fault that one of the kids gets upset about something or misbehaves, or that's not on me. That's them to some degree. And so it's trying to find that balance of doing my best as a parent, accepting what I've done, trying to do better, but letting it be also.
Yeah, no, I'm in the same boat. I mean, I've been thinking about it recently. I was actually talking about this with my kids the other day, that we have, our boys are 4, 7, and 8. So there's lots of conflict. Like they fight with each other. They get along great. They fight. It's constant. And so, all of us get into the red zone of like frustration and anger with each other multiple times a day. Before being a dad, I probably had one of those moments every 4 months where I was like, I'm like heated up about this. It's literally went from 0 times a day on average to 20. And so I think at the end of the day, to feel like, did I do right? Yeah. Like there, is, you have to kind of breathe and be like, okay, my intention here, my baseline is I love these kids so much. Yeah. I'm trying my best. And so I try to remember that I'm never going to be perfect. And as long as I really am my intention is love, and I'm telling them that I'm going to mess up just like they do. And be compassionate with myself as I'm compassionate with them. Like they get to snap all the time and kick each other. And I'm like, okay, here, learn that lesson. I still love you. But me, if I snap and I'm like, I'm so frustrated. Right. I'm so hard on myself because I shouldn't be there, but I think, I don't know about you. I feel like I need to be as compassionate with myself as I am with them. Of like, we're all learning riding these emotional waves, and there's no like standard for this is the way to act in this moment, because everything's fluid with kids. Like sometimes they need a really soft approach, like, hey, you're amazing, you can do this. And sometimes they need like, you're gonna get in the water, buddy, because we committed to this, and like you're not turning around. And you don't know which one is going to be the right one at that moment. So it's trial and error. And I think it's a hard job. It's a wonderful job.
No, exactly. It's amazing how I feel so similar. I have a 9 and 12-year-old, 2 boys. So yep, battles and love, right? It's like all going on at the same time. And yeah, that the moments of agitation that come, right? It's just like, wow, it's crazy. And I going to the philosophical way, you've done all this big, deep thinking and meditating and been around the world and on these incredible retreats and hung out with monks. And, there's this head in the clouds, feet on the ground dilemma, right? You're like, That's something I've always kind of struggled with, or talked to a lot of people about, right? You have this very spiritual world that's all just energy and molecules, and let's just meditate and be the universe. But then you have the reality of this world we've constructed, and kids, and it's like trying to have both of those experiences in life is certainly interesting.
It is. It is, and I think it's, for me, it's a lot about mindset of like not pitting one against the other. It's all the same path, and like if we were monks in a monastery, you and me, Travis, and we had taken all that out and said we're just gonna focus on meditating this life.
Yeah.
And if we had a good teacher, and this is what all the stories are like for monks, is like they create all these challenges for you. No, you can't just like sit in the cave and zone out. Like, you're gonna build a house right now, or like we're gonna put obstacles in your way to get you to not attach to one state or another. Like, the state of bliss is temporary. It happens in meditation. It's a beautiful glimpse at that energetic oneness that is, but that is not all that is. We are also embodied beings who have differentiation, and so and those exist simultaneously, the oneness and bliss and the differentiation and the chaos. So that's what all those texts, like from the Tao Te Ching to the Avatamsaka Sutra, are about, how duality is actual and unity are the same. And so what I think about is, in life as dads or as business people, or we don't need a guru poking us and being like, hey,
we have that.
Stop meditating. You got to cook me lunch. We have our kids, and we have these innumerable challenges, and all of those challenges are our way of integrating and finding flow within the chaos. So this is not something that I excel at, but when I have pitted, like, sometimes I'll be like, I used to get to live in my van and surf anytime I want and like cruise around. I had so much freedom. Anytime I felt bad, I could just like go surf. I could play my guitar. I could whatever. And now I don't have any freedom. I'm either working or I'm being a dad, and my surf sessions are 30 minutes. And if I get into that mindset of this is what wrecked me when I'm stressed, it's like I get into the mindset of, this is my greatest growth opportunity and my greatest teacher. And because things were pretty cruisy and happy for me, these challenges are the most important thing that are allowing me to become, in the Buddhist sense, like a bodhisattva, where I'm not just concerned with my own personal bliss and able to access that. I'm concerned that nobody's free until we all can wake up to a larger reality of compassion and love. And so fatherhood, I think, or parenthood, is really like, it's the ultimate, it's an amazing spiritual process, and it's good because it's difficult. And so that's the mindset that I don't always have. I can conjure it on a podcast.
Well, right. No, totally.
It's helpful.
Yeah, we sit and we gripe about the grind of parenthood, but like those moments, those glimpses of bliss, or those real moments of bliss, there's nothing like them, right? Like the beauty of our children, and be able to see the wonder of the world through their eyes, and have these experiences kind of with them. I mean, of course, it's amazing stuff. So speaking of that, so your book here, let's get it in front of the camera. Mop rides the waves of life. I I grabbed that, and especially I think it's kind of aimed really at like 4 to 8 year olds generally. But I shared it with my 9-year-old. He was excited that I was going to talk to you because I think the lessons in here are things he can use. They're things I can use for sure. But could you talk a little bit about how you try to talk about surfing and waves and the ocean and the lessons they have for kids?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great that it's a picture book because when you just talk about like, oh, an emotional wave for a kid, it's sort of abstract. Like, what are you really talking about? And the fact that waves are passing in the ocean, I think I would sometimes refer to those things before having written MOP in picture books. And I think it went over their heads. I mean, pun intended with the duck dive. But yeah, when I got that down on MOP evolved just organically. I wasn't thinking, oh, now I'm going to write a mindfulness kids book about surfing. I just love to doodle, and I was drawing waves, and it's kind of a nice meditative practice for me. And drew a kid with curly hair, and I was like, I really like this character. The way this kid looks, and I started drawing him on more waves, and then and that evolved into a storybook. Then I was like, oh, maybe I'll try to publish this. And I think I didn't know, honestly, how it would go over with my kids. But it was cool because right when the galleys came in and we had like the full color PDF and Matt Allen, the illustrator, also made a coloring book. It was right when COVID hit. Oh. And so we were all locked down all of a sudden. And then I had this tool of a coloring book. And so we were, in homeschool there, and they were coloring, mopping, duck diving, the wave of fear, sadness, and anger. And I wasn't really talking about the concepts much. They were just coloring, and they knew the story. But then, like, a week into quarantine, like, everybody was raging mad and fighting a lot and just going nuts. And I had started hanging their pictures up on the wall of Mop duck diving those emotions. And just one day during a fight, I was like, hey, look at Mop. Like, you're in a wave, and it's going to pass. So just wait a beat, before you hit your brother or whatever. And our oldest was like, no, it's not going to pass. I'm going to be angry at him forever. And he heard him say it. And I was like, forever, really? And he laughed. And then the anger broke. And so all through like the 3 months of that end of homeschool, I kept those pictures up. Didn't work every time so well, but like it became a natural language for us where emotions pass. When you're right in the thick of it, when you're right in the red zone, literally your amygdala is just like lit up and on lockdown, and you have no access to your prefrontal cortex. Like you're no creative thinking. And so kids are like the perfect demonstration of this, because it doesn't matter what you say when they're in that state. They're just going to, they're like angry dogs, just. Yeah. So you have to literally just find a way for them to chill before they don't hurt each other or themselves, and let the emotion pass. And that's tough to find language for. And I think pictures work well. So I've started like just being, using those pictures to remind them like, this is temporary. If you just go outside for 2 minutes, then we can come in and talk about it, but we can't address it because and the other thing that I found is really helpful is not putting it on them that like, you're the only one in the red zone who this happens to. I'll say to them, I'm in the red right now. I'm in an angry wave. And we all need a minute, and then we'll work it out, and that has worked pretty well for us. And, so I hope it's, and I'm getting some reports that it's working for other parents and families and schools. So I'm stoked. I didn't know how it would go over, because it's kind of a high level psychological
Oh
idea.
yeah, big time.
But kids, I think with the pictures, they're like, oh yeah, I get that.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And like I said, it's a concept that works for me too, right? Like as an adult, when I'm in that red zone in those situations, I'm like, just duck dive under this one and wait for that calm water on the other side here for a minute. Um,
Yeah.
a couple, I guess, last things I want to talk about. It's hard to say this is the last thing because it's such a big topic, but the idea of like the quest for the perfect ride, kind of like your one subtitle here, stumbling towards enlightenment and the perfect ride. Um, what does that mean? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, it was funny that we stumbled into that subtitle because, you know, to sort of give away the conclusion is that the perfect ride is the ride we're on now. It's to put it in the future is the ultimate sort of trap, because you'll always be looking on the horizon, and the wave that you find, the way the monkey mind works, it'll always say, well, what's next? I got that, but compared to what? And so that's the way in Buddhist terms, the samsaric mind works. And it's the mind that separates, you know, us from that place of unity, from being the ocean inside the drop rather than being the drop that's barred off from the rest of the ocean. And so and it's the ultimate, what we were talking about earlier is, I think it's easy to get into a place where you say, okay, well, the ultimate ride is what I'm on, the wave I'm on now, so I'm just going to give up goal setting or give up trying to find like a sweet wave. And that's not what I'm saying is true, but I'm saying that somehow that you can hold both, and realizing that seeking, if you're seeking and putting the perfect ride out there on the horizon, it'll always be just
over that horizon. Yeah.
Over that horizon. But if, you're like, well, I right now has all the fullness of, I have access to the fullness of the ocean because the ocean is inside me. I'm already there. So I can enjoy the sort of playfulness of this smaller minded me that just wants to like stoke out and compare and be like, nah, I want to learn how to get a better tube. But really seeing that self or that mind as one that's almost like a movie you're watching, where you're like, I can enjoy this movie and be like stoked that Bruce Willis like saved the day. But if he doesn't, it's no big deal.
Right.
Because I'm connected to something bigger all the time. Like if I have to shut off this movie halfway through, whatever. It's like it's all good. It's all good, and it's always all good. The perfect ride is now. And within that, I can play around in this, place of that humans have constructed, where there's all these rules of what's good and what's awesome, and how famous are you, and that's like the playground of our reality that you can choose to engage with on any level. But I think the metaphor of that yogis and Buddhists use a lot is the one of dream. Like if you're in a nightmare and you don't know you're dreaming, you are terrified. But if you're in a nightmare or a dream and you realize you're dreaming, you're free. You're like, this is still kind of weird. I'm in this dream and there's this monster, but I'm not scared. And they say that that is the feeling of true enlightenment, is that it's not that things aren't important and maybe the other characters on your dream, you can help them, but you're still, the world is still there, but you see through it in a way, and you can be playful about it. And so yeah, I don't know if that makes any sense at all.
It absolutely does. It absolutely does. Totally. And lastly, then the title of that book. The idea that all waves are water. I'm sure we've touched on this concept, but water podcast talking about surfing. What wanted just to kind of come back on and close on that. What your philosophy is that led to that title.
Yeah, I mean, it's another angle on what we were just talking about, where we want to pit things against each other, like, everything's in the flow, except Donald Trump, everything is, and we want to judge our feelings too, of like, these feelings are blissful and groovy, and this feeling it's not part of the sea, and what All Our Waves Are Water, that title is getting at, is really like that feeling of, actually, you can embrace it all, because whether you're talking, and on multiple levels, like in your meditation, you might say, this is a bad meditation, I'm feeling really jealous or guilty or but there's a switch that can happen where you say, well, but this anger or this guilt or this jealousy actually has the same basic source. It's like, it's energy moving around. And if I just feel it, what's the actual feeling? It's like, well, it's heat, or it's discomfort, or it's tightness. That sort of, as soon as you notice it and be like, what is it actually? It's just like, well, this is maybe a gnarly wave or a big storm. It feels bad, but what's its essence? It's water. Does it have to, does it have it doesn't have to become my identity. It's just because, going back to being like a guilty dad, it's like, I don't have to let this bad feeling become who I am, because its nature is natural. It's just, it's what it is. And so, that's the kind of meditative level of All Our Waves Are Water, is like, be with what is. It's there. And then on a sort of life reality level, it's, there's something to that too, in holding the unity and in duality. And it's not something that I feel like is still kind of a koan for me personally, where I'm like, it's a question.
Still chewing on that.
Yeah. But I'm riffing on still. I'll get back to Travis.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, maybe we can link up again and further explore these things, or and so forth. But Jaimal, I really am glad for the opportunity to talk with you. Hopefully one day this can be in person and we can sit around and talk forever, catch some waves, who knows what. But really grateful for your time and your perspective. And you, this was like a therapy session for me. You just planted a bunch of seeds and things I'm going to circle back on and work on. So I appreciate it so much.
Right on. I appreciate the time just to chat, and look forward to doing it again, hopefully on a beach somewhere. And you guys stay safe. Hope you get some good hurricane swell.
Yeah, we have all these storms in the Atlantic right now, and so there's a bunch of waves, but the wind is not cooperating. You know the story. So I'm just watching and waiting for those windows to slide in. But cool. Well, thanks a lot. Take care.
You too, Travis. Take care.
Waterloop.
The Waterloop podcast is brought to you by High Sierra Showerheads, the smart and stylish way to save water, energy, and money while enjoying a powerful shower. Use promo code WATERLOOP for 20% off at HighSierraShowerheads.com.
You're in the water loop. Water loop, water loop, water loop.